Hello and welcome everybody, this is Roland Hartmann from graphicinmotion.com and it is tutorial time again. I recently released an After Effects template that's called Audio Spectrum Music Visualizer, and let's take a look at this here. And you see it is a project that reacts to audio, that uses audio spectrums and other effects to visualize music. And I got a few requests how I made this template, and in this tutorial I will show you how you can create visualizers like this. So let me mention that we do not use any third-party plugins. So this was made only using native After Effects effects. Before we jump into After Effects and get started with the tutorial, I want to invite you to visit my website, which is www.graphicinmotion.com. There you can find all my After Effects templates. You can also get the Audio Spectrum Music Visualizer if you want. There are more visualizers available, and you can also watch a bunch of free tutorials in the tutorial section. Now let's jump right into After Effects and start the tutorial. First of all, I want to create a new composition, and in this case I just use the HDTV preset and I just use 20 seconds for now and call this my visualizer. Now I want to import some audio, and I just use one of the preview files from Audio Jungle. It's actually exactly the same that I also used for the preview videos for my template. And I get this question a lot why I use the previews with the watermark, and this is because VideoHive authors are allowed to use, or are invited actually to use, the previews from Audio Jungles in the projects to promote these music files. So if you want to get the music that I use for the preview and also for this tutorial, you will find a link in the video description. So what I did while talking was I created a new composition out of my audio. I just dragged the audio onto this symbol here to create a new composition, and now I will call this composition audio. And now I will drag my audio composition into my visualizer composition. So the first options that you have in After Effects to create audio reaction are two effects. And if we go to our effects and presets here, let me open this up here, and you type in audio, you see we have audio spectrum and audio waveform, and both of these are quite similar. So let's take a look at both of these effects. Let's create a new solid by pressing Ctrl and Y. Actually, I should activate my screen keyboard. So now you can see what I am clicking and what I am pressing on my keyboard. And we call this here, first of all, the spectrum. And now we apply the audio spectrum effect. And you see in this effect, you can specify an audio layer. So let's specify audio number 2, or the second layer here, audio. And you see immediately that something is happening. Now our spectrum is reacting to the audio. One nice feature is that we can apply this to a path. You can either change the start and the end position and can create lines like this, but we also can apply this to a path, and this is what I want to do. So I select my layer and I will create a circular mask on my layer. So I hold down Shift and Control to constrain this to the middle, and let's say I want to make a circular mask like this. Now with my spectrum selected, I just choose path and I specify mask number 1 as my path. And now you see something is happening here. Our spectrum got wrapped around our mask. Now let's add a few more bands here, just maybe 250. And I want to change the frequency a little bit so that this is a little bit of a narrower region. So maybe I will set this to 450 and this to 1250 or something like that. Let me take a look here. When I scrub through, you see this is already reacting. And now I will just change the maximum height a bit so that we see this a bit more obvious, maybe to 1000. It's a good value. I think this looks quite good. And the next step is to change the softness, maybe to 10%. I don't want these to be that soft. And now I will change the thickness back to 2. And you see now my audio spectrum gets cut off. And this is actually because of the mask. So if we take a look, the mask is now set to add. And if we set this to none, you see now the audio spectrum is visible throughout the composition. And this is important. Now we can change the colors. And if I make the thickness more obvious. You see we have an inside and outside color. If I change this inside color now to something blue, you see what this does. And if I change the softness, you see that the outside color becomes more obvious. But actually, I do not want this. I think this doesn't look good. And I want these to be thin, and I want these to be only colored in one color. So let's colorize these. Bit of an interesting color, something like that. Okay, and I will set the outside color to the same color. So this is the first audio spectrum, and I really like it. So the next option that we have, or the next effect, is the audio waveform. And actually, it is pretty similar. So let's create a new solid and call it wave. And now let's apply the audio waveform to this solid. And again, we have the audio layer. I can specify my audio as the audio, and you see we have no frequency settings here. So this is just creating a representation of our waveform of the audio. And again, we have the option to set it to a path. And I can just copy this mask here. So copy it over, and now I will make it a little bit smaller. Sorry, just the mask, and I just scale this down. Something like that. And now I will set this to mask 1, and you see now it is wrapping around the mask 1. And in this case, I want to reduce the samples a bit so that it's not so spiky, that it looks a little bit more digital. Maybe something like that. Maybe we add 24 here, looks not too bad. And maximum height, reduce it a bit. Let's see what this does, how this reacts. I think this is quite okay. Maybe I reduce it even more. 16, something like that, and reduce the maximum height even further, 50. I just want a small reaction on this one in the middle. Yeah, this looks quite good. Okay, so you see this is pretty similar. And one thing that I didn't show you that is quite cool, you can of course also change this to digital, so you can also create like these, the same look like this, and you can also change this to dots. And actually, let me create a dot version of this spectrum here. So I just duplicate the spectrum here and call this spectrum dots. And now I just reduce the mask size here. Hold on Shift and Control, constrain it like so, set it in between here. And now let's choose, instead of digital, let's choose analog dots. You see what this does, looks quite cool. And I will just rotate this a bit so that it's a bit offset here. And maybe we will also change this here from, let's say, 250 to 750, so that it just reacts a little bit different. And now let's just reduce the maximum height here. Let's increase the frequency bands to 400, that it's a little bit more obvious. Let's change the size to 1. Now I have to change this to full so that we see this. Maybe it's too small, maybe I increase it back to 2. And let's change the color to something different here. So maybe a little bit of this interesting bluish color here. Another option that's quite cool that I didn't mention in the spectrum is the hue interpolation. So if I increase this, you see that now After Effects will just interpolate the hue over this circle. And you can create quite cool effects with this. So if you take a look at my preview, you see that I use this slightly here as well. So all of these are a little bit interpolated so that the colors differ around these circles. So you can use this, don't overdo it, because otherwise it just gets rainbowish, but I think a little bit subtle amount is looking really cool. So we can do the same here. Let's also apply a little bit of interpolation to this one here. And this will just create a bit of variation. Now my waves, I have to change this back to my lines. And you see we have no such interpolation option on my waves. So I cannot really interpolate this here, but I can change the color. So let me change this color to not this pinkish, but a little bit of violet, maybe a bit brighter. And okay, I think this blends quite nice. Good, now we have created 3 different reactions with 2 effects. And this is more or less everything in After Effects that natively reacts to audio. But we can use our audio to drive nearly any effect that we want in After Effects. And I will show you how we can do this now. So first of all, let's create a new layer and let's call this radio waves. So with this radio waves layer now, I go to my presets and I search the radio waves effect and I apply it to my radio waves layer. And I will just solo this for a moment. And you see that radio waves just creates waves. And you can change the frequency, you can change the expansion, you can change the velocity. Now I want my audio to drive these values. And so how can I do that? You need a little workaround here, but it's pretty simple. There is this option if you select your audio layer and go to Keyframe Assistant that's called Convert Audio to Keyframes. And if we click this, let's take a look what will happen. So first of all, After Effects now created this layer here. Let me just colorize these in a different color so that we see what After Effects did here. It created the audio amplitude layer. And if we open this up, we have 3 slider controls here. And I'm actually only interested in both channels because I do not want to separate the stereo signal here. And if I select this slider and open up my graph editor, you see what it did. So it just creates a representation of my audio wave, and this actually creates values. And you see in this case the values are between 10 and something like 50. So we can use this to drive animations, but we can even make this more specific. So let's delete this for now. Let's select our audio layer. And I want to use an audio effect that is called high and low pass. So let's select this effect and drag it onto our audio layer. With this effect, we can filter frequencies. And first of all, I filter all the low frequencies. So I set it to low pass and I set it to a really low frequency like 70. And if we listen to this now, let me just turn down the volume a bit so that it's not too loud. -15 should be fine. And if we listen to this now, you will see what this does. It just filters out all the high frequencies and only allows the low frequencies below 70 Hz to pass. And this is what I want. Now if I select this layer and apply the Convert Audio to Keyframes, and I call this low now, you see that now the waveform will look totally different. So let's select this and let's activate the graph editor. And you see now this is only representing the low frequencies. And let's take a look. This is now between very low value of 1 and 7 units. So I want to change this a bit to make it easier to work with. So let's double click this slider here to select all the keyframes. And now I can drag these values and I want to increase the intensity or the values here quite a bit. So what I will do is I will just drag this up until a value of 100. So now I approximately have my values between, in this case 10 or below 10 and 100. So now if you take a look at this slider and if I scroll through my time indicator, you see that there are values between 10 and 100 approximately put out all the time, reacting to our audio. And now I can use these values and link them through expressions to control my animation. So let's do that. Let's select the radio waves and let's come in here. First of all, I want to control the frequency. So I click Alt or I hold down Alt on my keyframe and click the stopwatch to add an expression. And instead of typing in something here, I will now just use the pick whip. So let me scroll down here to my frequency value, and now I will just pick whip my slider here. So actually let me just delete the left and the right because we do not need this. And you see immediately that something really cool is happening. So now the frequency is really reacting to our audio. It's probably a little bit too much, but we can deal with that in a moment. The next thing that I want to do is I want to also link my velocity. So Alt click the velocity to my slider here. And this will even increase this effect. So now you see they have a slight offset here. But also this is way too much. So how can we change this? We need a little bit of math here. So let's go into these. Let's turn off this for now. Let's take a look at our expressions. So now we are linking to these values directly. But if I multiply this now by maybe 0.2, then I reduce the intensity quite a bit, and this was now the frequency, and you see this is not enough, so maybe I just multiply it by 0.5 to reduce this a little bit. And I also multiply the velocity 0.5 to reduce this bit. Okay. Now it's still reacting to the audio, but it's not so crazy anymore. It still looks pretty good. Now let's work on this a little bit and let's change a few settings to make this look cool. First of all, I think that the expansion lifespan is way too high, so I want this to maximum be 2 or 3 seconds. Let me take a look here. Maybe we make it 3 seconds long. See what this does now. It's not too bad. It looks quite cool. And I want to reduce the velocity a bit because the offset is too high, so I changed this to 0.2. I think I like this a bit better. And actually, if I just delete the velocity and yeah, let's delete the velocity because this creates this offset, and maybe I just will leave the expression on the frequency for now. Makes it a bit cooler. And what I can do now is I can make this look more interesting, and therefore I can change the stroke profile from square maybe to sawtooth in. That looks quite good. And I want to change the start width to something higher so that we see maybe 20. It's quite good. And the end width we can set it to 2 so that they really get thin in the end here. So let's take a look what this does. And yeah, I think it looks pretty good, but I think it's a bit too dense. So let's reduce this a little bit, 0.4. And I think, yeah, this is really a really nice look. That is also really reacting nicely to our audio. So I can play this for a moment. Let's create a quick run preview of this section here. And therefore I will just disable the effect that is still active here, the high pass effect. So let me quickly create a quick run preview. Just that you see how this is reacting to the audio now. And it is only reacting to the low frequencies. So let's run preview this again. Yeah, and you see now how it is really nicely reacting to our audio. I'm not quite satisfied with the look here. I do not want to spend too much time on this, but let me reduce the frequency a bit and let me just make these a bit wider in the beginning. So like this, and reduce the frequency even more. I think this looks a bit better. Okay, let's say I'm satisfied with the look so far. So this is the radio waves, how you can apply these values to the radio waves. Now I want to create particles that react to the high frequencies. So to create a layer to react to high frequencies, we have to go back to our audio, activate our high and low pass effect, and now change it to high pass. And now I want to filter all the frequencies above 4000 Hertz. And if I now play this audio preview, you see that only the very high frequencies are filtered. And again, the same thing, I just go to animation and keyframe assistant, convert audio to keyframes. And now we have a second amplitude layer, and I will call this high. And again, I will go into these effects, the slider controls. I will just delete left and right channel and just use these both. So now I made one mistake. It only creates these frequencies or these keyframes in your work area. You see now I just created it in my work area. So I expand the work area to my whole comp and just do it again. This is very good. That's how you can learn to avoid these mistakes and how to save time. So let's go to convert audio to keyframes again. And now I just set this to high. Press E to reveal the sliders and delete left and right channel. Okay. Now we have our high frequencies, and you see that this definitely looks totally different than the low frequencies. So now we can use these values to create another reaction. And in this case, I want to use particles to react to these values. So let's create a new layer, Ctrl Y on the keyboard, and call this particles high, because these are the particles that will react to the high frequencies. So with these particles now, I will apply an effect that's called CC Particle Bird, also included in After Effects. And I know that in other particle plugins, like for example Trapcode Form, and there are already audio reactions included, and this makes it way easier, or also if you use Trapcode sound keys. But yeah, this tutorial is only about creating audio creations with native After Effects effects. And then the workaround is, of course, to use these slider values to drive animations. So with my particles now selected, I go first of all to the grids and guides, and I turn all of these off because actually I do not want to see them. And what I want to do now is I want to go to the physics, turn off the gravity. Actually, it doesn't really matter, but I do not really need it. And you see what we've got now. Now particles are just flying out because it's set to explosive. This is not too bad. And now what we can do is we can control the birth of our particles and also the velocity by our high values. So let's select the particle birth rate. Let's click Alt and click the stopwatch to create an expression. And now let's link this to our high slider here. And now let's take a look what this does. And you see now the particle reacts to our slider, and the more higher frequencies we have, the more particles shoot out. It's not that obvious now because there's one thing that I forgot. And let's do that now. Let's select all these values. You see the values only go from 0 to not even 3. So what I have to do, as I did with the lows, I have to increase this. So select all these keyframes, not particles, keyframes, and let's drag it up. And now it gets really crazy. Now we drag it up to 100. And then we reduce it again using some expressions. But that way you can really link these values to different parameters in After Effects. And then you can control the intensity by multiplying these expressions with different values. So now you see it is reacting pretty extreme. Quite cool actually, but this is not what we are after. So I have to go to my expression and lower this now by multiplying it times 10 maybe, or not times 10, but times 0.1 I should say, because I want to divide it by 10. Yeah, that makes way more sense. I think this is quite good. Now let's go to our particles and let's change a few settings here. First of all, I want to introduce some resistance here, maybe a value of 5. I do not want them to fly out as far, but farther than this, so 3, maybe 4, like that, 2, yeah, like that. That looks pretty good. Now they're flying out, and then there's some resistance, so they get slower in the end. Then longevity is now set to 1. Maybe I wanted to reduce this a bit, 0.5, maybe 0.75. Okay, it looks quite good. One problem that I see with this audio reaction now is that it is emitting particles all the time. So we just need to change this curve here a little bit. So let me show you how you can do this. You see that it never really reaches a 0, and so we do not really get the emitter to stop emitting particles. So there is the option to just release or to just reduce the particle birth rate even further. So we could try whether this works if I multiply it by 0.05. Maybe I get now a little bit more of an obvious reaction, but yeah, we get more of an obvious reaction. Can even turn this down even lower. And let's see what this does. But what I really wanted to do is I wanted to stop from time to time. So I will just change this curve a bit, and it's pretty simple. I just select all these particles down here at the bottom, maybe all of these here. Now let's say, first of all of these here, and then I hold down Shift and I create a second selection of these particles here, or particles, oh, we're talking about particles, sorry, keyframes of course. And now I just drag them down, hold down Shift to constrain the movement, and then I will just drag them down until 0. And now I just created or just change the values a bit. And now you see they're stopping, the emission stops, and this looks a little bit more after a good sound reaction. Okay, so I'm satisfied with that. And now let's improve the look of the particles. And I will just quickly change the particle type to motion square. And I want to change the depth size to 0.01. And let me take a look what this does now. Now the particles fly out. And now I want to do something totally different. I want to add floor, and I want to set the floor action to ice. And now if I go to my floor position, let me take a quick look here what this does. And I move it up. This is exactly what I want. Yeah, I should have done this before. Actually, I forgot it. This is very good. And now in extras, I can just go to the camera and rotate it by 90. And you see what we've got here. Now they're just spreading out on the disk. And this is actually what I want. So should have done this before. Sorry, forgot about it. Yeah, I just introduced the floor and set it to a really high position, and then I just rotated it, and now they're just moving on one plane in my scene, the particles. Now I can also crank up the birth rate again, because this is actually what I used in my visualizer as well. And I said that I also want to link the velocity to my slider here, so let's do that. Alt click on the velocity, and now let's pick whip this to the slider of my high layer, and you see now this is getting really crazy. Now the velocity is really high, and we have to multiply this times 0.1. Let's take a look. Maybe this is even too high. No, it looks quite good. I reduce it a bit more, 0.06. Let's take a look. And this is really nice. I really like this now. Really cool audio reaction. So make this a little bit smaller in the beginning, 0.17, 0.1. Sorry, you see I'm not really prepared. I didn't prepare values here. I played around with this while creating this, and yeah, I don't have my values in the head, so I'm just playing around here. But this is what you should actually do as well to create something really cool. And now we can reduce this even further so that they do not fly out so far. And yeah, I think this is exactly what I like. It looks really cool, and is a really nice audio reaction. I'll reduce this a bit. Now I'm satisfied. Okay, sorry. Now let's take a look. We can change the birth color here, and let's make these maybe something like that. And let's change this to a bit of bluish, darker blue in the end. And I want the depth size to be, yeah, it's okay. So quickly, to make this look a little bit better, I will change the radio waves color. I forgot this before. I'm forgetting everything today. Sorry for that. So like this, now it blends a little bit better. And to make this even better, let's just set all of these layers to add. And now you see slowly, this is starting to look a little bit better. So what I did next is I added a camera, distributed these layers in 3D space, and then I also controlled the camera zoom by one of these values. If you take a look here at my preview, you see that this is popping into the frame. If you take a look here at this region, you see that it is popping into the frame whenever the beat, whenever the kick drum is playing. So how can we do that? So let's first of all distribute this in 3D space, and I will really go over this quickly now. I will just make this 3D, and actually I cannot make my particles 3D, so I have to pre-compose them, move all of this into a new composition. Now, of course, my expressions don't work anymore, so I press EE to reveal them, and I will just correct them quickly. So let's go to our visualizer, and let's just relink these. So I just relink these to my high slider here, that they work again. Okay, good. Now I can close this. Now I can make this 3D as well. Now change this to custom view so that I see what I'm doing. Now I take this spectrum, move it out here. That's the big one. Okay, so I'll leave it like something like here. Spectrum dots, like that. Wave number 1, like that. Radio waves, like that. Scale them maybe a bit. And the particles somewhere in between. I think this is pretty good. Okay, so I just distributed them in 3D space slightly. You know, you can make this a bit more obvious if you want. So maybe just select these waves here and push them out further on Z-axis and select the dots here, push them out further as well. So again, you have to spend more time than I do right now. Okay, active camera. Now we create a camera, go to layer and select a new camera. And I want to make this 24 millimeters or 20, maybe a bit more. And now if I open up my camera options by pressing AA on the keyboard, then you see we have this zoom. And now I can use this zoom to create kind of a bounce effect. And I do this by just linking this here to my lower slider. But if I do this, now the zoom takes over the slider value. And of course, now I cannot see anything because the zoom is way too small. And what you have to do actually is, before you do that, or before the expression here, you should add value plus. So we just, whatever value is in there, plus whatever value this low slider has. And now it is there, but it is very subtle. And we can now increase this by multiplying this, maybe by 10. This will probably be too much, but let's take a look. And you see, now it's bouncing quite a bit, but yeah, now when the beat starts, it's a bit too much. So let's reduce it to 5. I think that this will work quite well. Okay, doesn't look too bad, really, not too bad. Okay, so you see this is a basic setup of this audio reactor, and if you take a look at my example, I just added way more layers and more spectrums and more particle layers and more wave layers, and I distributed them in 3D space, and I add color correction and blur and all of this good stuff to make it look good. But I think that you get the basic idea. Two more things that I want to do and that I want to show you how you can improve the look. You create an adjustment layer and you add a glow. This is always important when creating this hard style digital stuff here. And now let's increase the radius maybe to 250. Maybe this is too much. Yeah, then let's decrease the intensity to something better. And the glow may look way different when you are using it, because I'm working in 32 bits right now. I don't know why, but it was set like that. So I think this is not too bad. And if I go to my spectrum dots now and change this to a more vibrant color here so that it stands out a bit more, maybe something like this direction looks better. Then I could introduce some greens here in my spectrum, make this, shift this more towards green or turquoise or whatever you want to call it. So it's not too bad. One more thing that we can do, we can choose our particle composition and create a mask on it so that the particles don't fly out from the center, but that this is a little bit feathered. So I want to subtract this mask now and press MM to reveal the mask feather, and now I can feather this a bit. And you see now they do not fly out from the center, and this looks probably a little bit better, makes it a little bit smoother, this whole thing here. And we can see the radio waves better, and actually the radio waves are way too prominent, so I will reduce their opacity to 70. Okay, so you see where this is going, and I recommend that you spend way more time when creating these visualizers and be creative. Think, how can I use these values here that I have on these layers, and which other values can I drive using these parameters, and how can I set this all up? So the possibilities are really endless. Okay, so this is it with this tutorial. If you liked it, then please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit my website, which is www.graphicinmotion.com. Check out all the contents that I have there. My After Effects template if you want to support me. And if you are working on a project and you need something, then take a look at this. And if you want to learn, I have tutorials on my website, all free, of course, to watch. And I also have a basic course for all After Effects beginners. If you really start with After Effects, then this is the place where you can learn all these basics. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope to see you soon. Goodbye.